Hello, this is Someone Guy in Hawaii, and today we are looking at the Free Radical. This is a legendary pistol based on the same non-legendary Maliwan blaster as the Hellshock and the Beacon, and as the title suggests, this gun makes both of those guns mostly obsolete. Okay, there may be specialized builds that utilize particular Beacon or Hellshock traits that the Free Radical cannot match. Beyond that, though, a mid to top tier performing Free Radical will almost always outperform a beacon or a Hellshock. Okay, unless we are going up against shock resistant or immune enemies and don't have access to any other elements, no elemental anoints, no Amar with infusion or force expression, no Mo's incendiary, etc. The Free Radical is the Maliwan pistol. Now, Free Radical is only shock, old guy. Doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to show this in the numbers and in some demonstrated gameplay. So, Free Radical, which as stated only comes in shock, drops only in DLC 6. It has a significantly increased chance to drop from Beef Pliskin on the Karas Canyon map, the third map of Ava's Murder Mystery series. It's a fairly quick and easy farm. However, it's an elevated map with a lot of drop-offs, and Pliskin throws his gear upon defeat, so his loot has a tendency, or at least a high chance, of dropping into a void, so we might want to clear out our lost loot before we start farming. Okay, so Free Radical hits spawn a second projectile similar to the carrier assault rifle that circles back and attempts to strike the original target. It can ricochet off of one surface before hitting the initial target. If a second surface gets in the way, the round is spent. Okay. The second projectile will do the same basic damage as the original, unless the original strike is a crit. It's also possible to get spawn projectiles to crit, even if the original hit does not, especially on large targets like the Trons. In any case, if we ignore critting, but assume the second projectile always hits, we are looking at double whatever the listed damage is. If the initial hit is amped, the spawn projectiles are also amped. The initial hits do splash damage, but spawn projectiles do not. Splash damage bonuses only apply to the initial projectile, not the spawn ones. Okay. Spawn projectiles can also proc damage over time. This means that with elemental chance figures of 36, 41, or 48% unmodified, a status effect is almost guaranteed with sustained fire. Times 2 variants fire two very closely spaced original projectiles, each spawning its own additional round. These variants also consume 2 ammo per shot. Amara's infusion skill affects the initial hit but not the spawn projectile, which instead does full base shock damage. Forceful expression, on the other hand, is applied to both the original and spawn projectiles. Basically, elemental anointments and any skills from any Vault Hunter which add elemental damage apply to both the original and spawn projectile. Now, by my analysis, there are, or should be, 600 possible Free Radical variants, not counting 4 possible sites. I'm not going to go over all the parts, as they are the same pool that the Hellshock, Beacon, and all other Maliwan blasters pull from, except for probably the barrel, which gives it its special abilities. Now, this is what the stat and performance ranges look like compared to the Beacon and the Hellshock. This is the same table used when I compare those two pistols. I just added the Free Radical to it. Now, base damage and elemental damage figures already give the Free Radical a clear lead at the top end. It's only the low end of the Free Radical single point damage that gets eclipsed by the other two slightly. Okay. This, however, or that, however, is base damage. What counts is damage over time, DPS, okay, which factors in rate of fire, reload speed, and a magazine size. When we compare those numbers, the Free Radical jumps ahead. Now, notice it has 2 columns. The left column is base DPS and assumes, as do all DPS calculations, that we fire full auto reload and continue firing while hitting every shot. Okay, Free Radical beats the Beacon and Hellshock if we compare top performers. Okay, the right-hand column, however, adds the fact that every spawn projectile comes back and hits target. It assumes that every spawn projectile comes back and hits the target. And if we include that damage, even the lowest performing Free Radical puts the other two kind of to shame. Okay. This last set of numbers adds elemental damage over time to the mix. All of these guns have very high elemental chance, and combined with good rates of fire, this means we are pretty much guaranteed to proc and maintain a status effect with sustained fire. Now, because the Free Radical has higher base damage values, elemental damage values tend to be proportionally higher. So when we add in that damage, the dominance over the Beacon and the Hellshock becomes even greater. But wait, old guy, we keep telling you the Free Radical only comes in shock, and shock sucks against anything but shields. That's this table. Okay, it takes the high and low DPS base plus elemental damage figures I just went over and adjust that damage for specific target types. The free radical has 2 rows, one each for high and low DPS. Hellshock has 4 rows, high and low for shock and high and low for fire. Beacon has 10 rows, high and low for each of the 5 elements it can spawn with. Okay, this is the health bar column, the shielded column, and the armor column. So let me split it up into 3 separate tables by target type so we can then sort on each highest to lowest values. Okay, so this shows us 2 things. 1, a top tier free radical is the best choice against any target tag. Okay, the fact that it's only shock, not including any added elements, is irrelevant. Even after losing a significant percentage of damage using shock against health or armor, free radical still does more damage. 2, even the poorest performing free radicals do a pretty good job. They're in the top third of their rankings. Okay, now that's what the numbers say at least. What about actual gameplay? Well, I've got here a top performing Hellshock, 2 top performing beacons, and the highest performing free radical I found so far. Okay, top performing means that according to my calculations, each of these have the highest DPS of all their available variants. Okay, I've yet to find the top performing free radical, but this one is actually close enough. It's actually, I think it ranks 7th. Okay, now the build, including gear, is set up for survivability so as not to give an advantage to any one weapon or to eclipse the performance of each gun. No infusion, no forceful expression. I also leave our action skill element on shock for the duration of the test. I do have guardian rank turned on. Everything on Mayhem 11. Shield Anoint does not apply, and we're not going to throw the grenade, so that anoint does not apply either. All of these use the same plus 250% phase cast anointment. The beacons are identical except for shock fire and shock corrosive. We test the Hellshock, free radical, and shock fire beacon against Trant because he has shields and health. And then we swap in the shock corrosion beacon versus the fabricator, which has shields and armor. First Trant.
I'm unstoppable! Not today!
Okay, so looking at the numbers, the beacon and the Hellshock are on par with each other. I've actually tested this several times, and usually the Hellshock has the slight edge. But the free radical always beats them both by a significant margin. Okay, you can see the times yourself. Now, as for the fabricator, the Hellshock with only fire shock is ill-suited to the task, and I'm not going to show the entire run. I've condensed it here. You can see the run time. It's pretty long. Corrosive shock beacon has a much easier job because it has the appropriate elements. it does a pretty good, pretty fast job. It works fine.
Fully energized. You're dealing with a cycle. Oh, you've just made a big mistake.
But again, the free radical still outclasses them both. Okay, so unless we have builds that take advantage of the beacon nova or other elements besides shock, a top performing free radical on a straight performance basis is always preferable to the beacon or Hellshock. The only other caveat I'd mention is to be mindful of situations where the spawn projectiles can't hit the original target easily, like in a narrow corridor. How do we know we have a top tier free radical in our hands? Well, without digging into the numbers, any ×2 variant will outperform any single shot variant. Okay, the highest DPS variant, a 39303 ×2 variant, does 60% more DPS than the highest single shot variant, although the lowest ×2 is only slightly better. The 7 highest DPS variants in the game have ×2 damage values of 39303, 35730, 37432, and 35560. Okay, beyond that, the math gets sticky. We can't go by damage because the other factors, parts, play a big part. So, if you don't want to farm through 600 variants for those 4 damage values, there's a Google Docs save file linked below with a copy of the 35560 variant. Apologies if you're on console. Find a friend who's on PC and have them mail a copy. Okay. Now, I did my analysis the old-fashioned way by farming a lot of examples and comparing stats. The save editor I normally use to verify parts and modifiers and spot unlisted parts has yet to be updated with DLC 6 data. That produced some oddities in the results, but nothing major. When the editor is updated, I'll let you know if any significant findings come out of that. Okay. In any case, while the save file variant is not the highest DPS free radical according to my calculations, it actually ranks 7th, I've just demonstrated the superiority of that one variant over the best Hellshock and Beacon. Okay. There is, by the way, one other wrinkle. According to my calculations and notes, the Beacon received a damage nerf of 15% sometime in the recent past. Now, I keep mules with examples of high, low, and baseline damage variants for most weapons I analyze. And while doing this project, I noticed the numbers were not what they once were. Okay, I only noticed that, however, after I compared the older, higher numbers to the free radical numbers, the spreadsheet on the table numbers, and then went looking for Beacon and Hellshocks to do the practical testing. So those original higher Beacon numbers, though, are the ones that appear in the tables that I've done all the number comparisons on. So the Beacon issue is a separate one. I need to do some research to make sure I didn't miss any updates before I file a report with Gearbox. If it's a bug and gets fixed, it still won't change the results. Free Radical still outperforms it and the Hellshock. And that's it. Get yourself a Free Radical, get the one in the save file if you like, and go to town. Okay. As always, if you like this kind of content, a like or would be nice. Subscribe if you want to get more. Comment. Come check me out on twitchtv.com/SummerGuyInHawaii. And as always, stay safe and thanks for watching.